And among those book dealers that I frequently had major business with was a very, very strong bookseller in England, without any question, the leader in the theological field. But insofar as I could ever tell, an unregenerate man. I was almost frightened every time I went there. I always stayed in his home, and we were together usually 2, 3, even 4 days at a time. But he was so brilliant theologically that I always felt I had to be right, on the edge of very careful, lest I make some stupid statement with which I have great qualifications. But although time after time after time we had these serious theological discussions, I was never able once to speak to him about spiritual things. Now, that's not an uncommon problem, because countless times I've been in a pastor's home after a serious preaching engagement and sought to engage him in a spiritual conversation and found it impossible. Being a theological master doesn't make you a Christian. But every time I sought to converse with this bookseller about Jesus Christ in a personal and a real fashion, he cleverly turned the conversation aside. But then, to my utter astonishment, he called me one day and said he had decided to come to America, and he would like to fly into Chicago and spend a few days with us before he began his itinerary in the States. Well, we welcomed him with open arms, made it clear we would pick him up at the airport when he arrived. And to my astonishment, when I picked him up at the airport, this dear man said to me, "Let me tell you the purpose of my trip. I have come to listen to some of the great preachers in America." Woo! But to my amazement, he still would not tolerate a spiritual conversation with me. He was with us for a few very pleasant and sweet-spirited days, and then he went on his itinerary. Only a few weeks after he returned to his own home, I was there again. And because I was a major book buyer, I'm not talking about a dozen volumes. There were times when I purchased as many as 60,000 volumes on a single trip. So most book dealers welcomed me. But listen now, friends. When I was with him in his home, and full of expectation, I said to him, "Now tell me about your trip to the States and about the great preaching that you heard." He balled up his fist, which was very large. We were at the dinner table, and he gave it an incredible wallop, and all of the dishes jumped. And he said to me, "I didn't hear a single sermon preached in America." Well, why? Were you taken ill? Was it impossible to complete your itinerary? No, he said to me. It was because you don't have preachers in America. All you've got are teachers. And naively, I've said to him, in your mind, what is the difference between teaching and preaching? And once again, he balled up his fist and walloped the table so that I wondered why it didn't just simply collapse. And he said to me, this is not a matter of my personal opinion. Here is a long-established fact. To teach is to inform. To preach is to move. And he went on to explain, the teacher informs those who are listening to him of things they may not know. But the preacher, he finds the people here, and he knows they belong there. And in preaching, he moves them from where they are to where they belong. Now, I know that's not what some of you think. We heard it said this morning that teaching and preaching are the same, that the words are used interchangeably. Well, you may use them interchangeably, and I'm not going to try and correct you. If you want to be dumb, that's your choice. But I know that all across America, there are countless numbers of people going to church and coming away disappointed. In many cases, their heads were already so packed full of information they never acted upon, that they're at the point of oversaturation. I find people are hungry to be moved by God's word and by God's Spirit from where they are to where they belong. And I'm wondering how many preachers here are preaching and not teaching. Now, don't misunderstand. I'm not knocking teaching. It is a vital part of the work of ministry. In fact, many of our early New England churches had on staff both a preacher and a teacher. But I know absolutely that there's a difference between being informed and being moved.